What's up? I'm Graybeard, and this video is a new thing I'm trying out called Having an Opinion. Since Metal Gear remakes are a hot topic right now, as we're waiting in limbo for a release date for Metal Gear Solid Delta Snake Eater, I figured this would be a great time to address some slander on the name of one of my favorite Metal Gear games, the Twin Snakes. I recently replayed both Metal Gear Solid Integral and Metal Gear Solid The Twin Snakes, so I'm pretty fresh on my opinions for both games. So without further ado, hold on to your asses, we're gonna have a discussion. This is Metal Gear Solid versus Metal Gear Solid The Twin Snakes. Metal Gear Solid The Twin Snakes is a remake of the classic PlayStation title Metal Gear Solid from 1998. The Twin Snakes was released in North America in 2004. It was, rather unfortunately, and still is, an exclusive for the Nintendo GameCube console, with no ports or remasters for modern consoles or PC currently in the oven. It was handled by Silicon Knights, who had developed Eternal Darkness Sanity's Requiem for the GameCube 2 years prior in 2002. And yes, there are some references to that fact. I remember this game being advertised like crazy, but I don't remember what the hype for it was like because back in 2004, I had a PS2, not a GameCube. So I was kind of bummed out and annoyed, and I tried my best to ignore all the buzz because deep down I badly wanted to play a version of Metal Gear Solid that was like Metal Gear Solid 2 in style and mechanics. Unfortunately, it wouldn't be until 2008 when I bought a used GameCube from a friend in college that I got to play the Twin Snakes and see if it measured up to everything I wanted it to be in my head, which brings me to the points I want to try and make in this video. Not only are the visuals and the controls so much better than the original, but the Twin Snakes offers a new challenge to players who, like me, are very familiar with Metal Gear Solid. In short, this game fucking slaps. Let me quickly explain what I mean when I say I'm familiar with Metal Gear Solid 1. I played that game every Friday night like it was my personal weekend movie treat for 4 years. I didn't get a PS2 until like a year and a half after they came out, which means I didn't have a way to play Metal Gear Solid 2 when it came out. So I just kept playing Metal Gear Solid every week until I finally got a PS2. From all the times I fucked around and found out how quickly I could zip through the story, I was probably speedrunning this game at 14 and didn't even know it. I've forgotten more about this game than I could ever hope to learn again in my free time as an adult, which does kinda suck, because playing games and being good at them on the internet is pretty cool these days. Oh well. Anyway, back on topic. I am now going to talk about these video games as if I know something. These are opinions. I know you'll still flame me in the comments, but know that I am not immovable on any of these stances, though I do feel strongly about them. So feel free to let me know what you think. The first few cutscenes in the beginning of the Twin Snakes don't really stray from what we got in the original, but after those you really start noticing what's new. In just the dock and heliport areas, things already feel so much more interesting and challenging. Enemy patrol patterns are different, extra guards have been added, and we're barely into the game at that point. Now, the way I usually approach the heliport, once the codec calls are all wrapped up and everything, is to take out the approaching guard, run horizontally across the heliport to pick up the chaff grenades and not get caught by the searchlights, use one chaff to grab the loot in the side room, and then crawl past the sleeping guard and the camera to enter the truck and pick up the SOCOM. After that, I use a second chaff to go past the other camera and sneak upstairs, take out that guard, and enter the tank hangar from the second floor vent. Simply put, I can't do that in the Twin Snakes. First off, did you know that you can drag the guards to the edge of the cliff by the elevator and toss them to their doom? If you're telling me you didn't know that, you're lying, and I don't believe you. Just like everyone throws the guards into the ocean during the opening of the tanker in Metal Gear Solid 2, we all make the genome soldiers at the heliport fly for our amusement. Why? I don't know. Probably because we can't see them go splat and cognitive dissonance is a hell of a drug, but that's not what we're here to talk about. That feature wasn't in the original, and we all have Silicon Knights to thank for allowing us to scratch that very sadistic itch. They clearly figured out all the fun stuff to do in Metal Gear Solid 2 and put it all in the Twin Snakes. Hooray! When I approached the heliport in the Twin Snakes, I noticed that the searchlights now moved vertically instead of horizontally. After adjusting from the subsequent brain farting that occurred, I readjusted the order in which I complete the heliport, because, I had to. Since running past the searchlights put me in front of the truck now, that was clearly my next stop. There's still a handgun inside the truck, but now there's also an M9 tranquilizer gun underneath, because you can crawl under trucks now. Amazing. At this point, I accidentally let the cameras see me. I could have gone into first-person view and shot them, another perk from Metal Gear Solid 2 that was frustratingly absent from Metal Gear Solid, but I didn't have my suppressor yet, so I just hid and snuck upstairs when the alarm stopped. I want to note here that I played both Metal Gear Solid and the Twin Snakes on the same difficulty, which was normal for the sake of time. But the Twin Snakes would often throw a lot more guards at me during alarm sequences, and the Genome soldiers also did things like looking up and just generally having more situational awareness than their PS1 counterparts, in addition to having different patrol patterns, which counteracted some of the new features like hanging from the catwalk and shooting in first-person view. Now, this was my personal experience, but it is exactly the opposite of what I often hear and read about in regards to this game. So I feel it's important to say that while I'm not calling anyone a liar, I am saying that I disagree that hanging from ledges and shooting in first-person view made the game easier for me, because the enemies were behaving like they were set to higher difficulty levels. This made me feel like things were balancing out and presenting a new, genuine challenge. Something I didn't think I'd feel while playing two versions of Metal Gear Solid back to back, based on what the internet says. The other thing I want to address in terms of difficulty is the bosses of the Twin Snakes, particularly Revolver Ocelot and the two vehicle boss fights, the tank and the Hind D. I had a lot more fun with the Revolver Ocelot boss fight than I remember having it with it in the past. The main difference between the PS1 version and the GameCube version is how Ocelot's AI works. In the original, you could pretty much just chase him around in circles to win the fight. As long as you both keep moving, his ricocheting bullets will miss you, and he will eventually stop to reload. This gives you your opportunity to get in a shot. Putting it bluntly, that shit ain't fun. I've always criticized the original Ocelot fight for this, since it doesn't feel like a close-range gun battle at all. The fights with Olga in Metal Gear Solid 2 and young Ocelot in Metal Gear Solid 3 were far more satisfying. Each of them is memorable for a reason that is specific to those boss battles, and that's what I wanted to see from a remake of the original Ocelot boss fight. Unfortunately, I still think that the Revolver Ocelot fight in the Twin Snakes lacks some pizzazz, but it is definitely a step up. I don't doubt that it would be phenomenal if Hideo Kojima and his team had done it, but what we got is definitely better than what we had. Some Metal Gear Solid 2 mechanics make their way into the mix to spice things up. You can shoot the pipes in this room to cause steam jets to come out, as well as look around in first-person view much more quickly and with better control. Shooting the pipes can both help and hinder you, as the steam makes it harder for Ocelot to see you when he ricochets bullets, but it'll also cause damage when you walk through it, obviously. Being strategic about where you shoot the pipes is preferred if you're going to turn this room into a sweat lodge. And I want to discuss how neat it is using first-person view, and I don't mean to shoot Ocelot for a quicker win. I tried to do that, and he always noticed me lining up my shots and would duck behind another pillar before I could shoot him. Maybe I just suck, but I was not able to hit him in first-person view, so I just used it to try and locate Ocelot if I lost track of him, which was very useful without making the fight feel easier. He's a slippery old bastard, and I found that I needed to bait his shots and dodge his bullets to create openings for myself when he reloaded, because that would be my only chance to shoot him. Chasing him in circles in the Twin Snakes actually causes him to stop firing his gun, meaning he never stops to reload, and you just chase him in circles forever. I thought the changes definitely made it feel more like a close-range gun battle, but I also think that maybe the overall design could use some tweaking to make it more exciting. You know, besides having tripwire attached to C4 right in the center of the room. Next up would be the tank battle. Not much has changed about this fight. You can still use grenades and claymores to blow up the tank treads and slow the boss down to make it easier to play catch with your genome homie. Your genome, if you will. But this is where they made tweaks. In the original game, simply landing the grenades on top of the tank would deal damage. In the Twin Snakes, you have to make the grenades land inside the tank to blow the pilots out. It's like playing NBA Jam against a tank. I just thought that was a fun thing to know. The third remake boss I wanted to talk about without being too spoilery for anybody that hasn't played an old game is the Hind D. This was a little more frustrating than the PS1 version, which I thought was odd. You'd think the newer version would be less frustrating, but no. I do, however, believe that this is part of the intended difficulty of this fight. Kojima wanted it to be frustrating to play peekaboo with a helicopter piloted by Sean Bean, the British Kurt Russell. So naturally, the remake has to be even more infuriating, right? Probably not, but I do appreciate the world-class trolling done by the devs at the end of this fight. Originally, you could hide behind the thing that Liquid blows up at the end of the fight and not receive damage. However, in the Twin Snakes, the safe spot has been moved. So if you don't have enough health to survive that last explosion, that's it. Guess who has to do the fight over again? You. Or me. Or both of us. It definitely happened to one of us. 99% of the time, I felt like all of the fights were slightly more difficult than their PS1 counterparts. Again, I'm getting the sense that the AI was programmed to act like normal difficulty on easy, hard on normal, so on and so forth. On the other hand, I think the fight against Metal Gear Rex somehow got easier, but I am okay with that. He used to wipe the floor with me, and it was always a bit anticlimactic to spank every boss and then get stomped by the guy at the end, regardless of how realistic that it sounds for a giant mech to stomp on a normal-sized man. Being foot graffiti is an honor reserved for those with the codename Fox. Which brings me full circle. Since Gray Fox temporarily crippled Ocelot, and out of the whole group of bosses, the fight that stands out the most as having been updated is definitely Revolver Ocelot. He got a better boss fight in the remake after getting a new arm in the sequel. Man's got Riz and medical insurance in spades. And his fight gets a little too much hate. Maybe a little too much hyperbole as well, in the remake. As for the other members of Foxhound, I always give a standard shout out to Sniper Wolf for giving a speech while apparently being lung shot, and a big shout out to Psycho Mantis for making me use all 4 GameCube controller ports. You tricky fucker. More of the same bullshit just prolongs the inevitable. Meryl still calls you ugly. What's not ugly in the Twin Snakes is the cutscenes. Haha. See what I did there? I did a thing. Anyway, the 2 main reasons that I wanted to play Metal Gear Solid remade in the Metal Gear Solid 2 game engine were the superior controls and controller mapping, and to see all the cutscenes in that Metal Gear Solid 2 game engine that I thought was so badass for such a long time. Because it was. Now, I should probably address the elephant in the room here. There is a rumor about the cutscenes. When the Twin Snakes was being developed, Silicon Knights took a version of all the finished cutscenes to Kojima for approval. I believe the story goes that the cutscenes were just shot-for-shot remakes, and Kojima said something along the lines of, add your own flair to it. If this is true, I absolutely love that decision. And it's not just because I'm trying to say, this is what Kojimbo wanted, or because I'm trying to kiss Go Jumbo's ass in any way. I just think that the old cutscenes lack a lot of realistic movement, lots of head bobbing, and animatronic arm movements while the bodies stay rigid. Don't get me wrong, what Kojima and his team accomplished on the PS1 was awesome back then, but putting the same movements through a more sophisticated game engine would only highlight how unnatural it looks. And these games are definitely games that are meant to be enjoyed the same way as movies, so any kind of breaking of immersion is not going to help with the experience. As such, the cutscenes should be redone, in my opinion, to take full advantage of the technology at hand, a staple of the series, which is what they did. And speaking of series staples, a lot of people don't like how over-the-top or anime the cutscenes are in the Twin Snakes. And I'm not here to argue against the idea that these cutscenes are over-the-top or anime, whatever that means, because they absolutely are over-the-top, as is the rest of the series. Just look at Cyborg Ninja deflecting fire from multiple AK-47s, Olga doing somersaults off the big shell, Fat Man getting around on rollerblades, Solidus taking out a bunch of mini Metal Gear Rays by himself, every scene with Vamp, Snake breaking the fourth wall, or the bullshit with Ocelot's arm. All of that is just from Metal Gear Solid 2. Then you have motorcycle flip kicks, bullet bees, excessive gun twirling, a dude jumping all nimbly-bimbly from tree to tree, a retiree that has figured out how to do photosynthesis with his body, a man who is possibly possessed by a fire spirit, BDSM references, another man who definitely has lightning powers, a literal psychic ghost, Raiden as a cyborg ninja, Metal Gears that moo, more Vamp, Raiden and Vamp together, a wedding proposal during a firefight in the middle of an infiltration mission, another psychic ghost, a mech fight, two ripped as fuck 65-year-olds beating the shit out of each other, the third official death of Big Boss, and the fever dream that is the Phantom Pain, all making up the rest of the mainline games. So I kind of feel like Over the Top was established from the second game onward, and that, for better or worse, this is just what the series has become known for anyway. So adding all that Matrix-inspired craziness sort of makes Metal Gear Solid feel more like part of the family, in my opinion. And look, I will admit that I don't really have an argument for someone that doesn't even like where the series has gone. If you hate the cutscenes in the Twin Snakes because you just hate all the over-the-top shenanigans of the rest of the games, then that's fair. Clearly, this is just a design choice that does not jive with your interests, and that is okay. Just as long as you understand that the over-the-top action does appeal to a lot of Metal Gear fans, and that the Twin Snakes does have a fan base whose interests are just as valid as yours, even if they are different. Something else that's different is the voice lines. Don't quote me on this, but I believe all the voice lines from Metal Gear Solid were re-recorded for the Twin Snakes. I don't know, maybe Google that, but I feel like that's right. I heard that somewhere. Anyway, the quality and comparisons sort of range all over the board for me here, but overall I feel it's an improvement. As actors, the cast was able to approach the new recordings with a deeper understanding of not only the story, but their characters as well, seeing as how the PS1 title and its sequel had skyrocketed in popularity between 1998 and 2004. I think the performances that improved the most for me were Mei Ling, Nastasha, Naomi, all having softer accents and more human-sounding deliveries, and the series' two favorite bros, Snake and Otacon. Both David Hayter and Christopher Randolph portray their respective characters in such a way that you could never imagine anyone else taking those two roles on. Well, one of those two roles anyway. I want to give another shout out to the Psycho Mantis boss fight since we're talking about voice lines, because this guy had updated voice lines when he reads your memory card. Usually other games that get Easter eggs in Metal Gear titles have been worked on or overseen by Hideo Kojima. But he didn't direct this remake, so we get a sweet Eternal Darkness reference instead of a sweet Castlevania reference. If you haven't played Eternal Darkness: Sanity's Requiem, you are absolutely missing out on one of the best GameCube gems. Check it out. Anywho, back in the world of tactical espionage action. Yet another difference with the audio of the Twin Snakes is that the original soundtrack was replaced with all new music. Understandably, that caused some outcry. Understandably. But I personally do not have a problem with the new OST, and I would love to explain why to those of you who did not just smack the video closed after hearing me say that I accept the Twin Snakes original soundtrack. So, this reasoning is going to be so simple that it may annoy some of you, and that's okay. I wish I had a nuanced take that was steeped in music theory, but I don't. I'm not that guy. I just feel like the music reminds me of the soundtracks for Metal Gear Solid 2 and 4. Therefore, it fits in with the rest of the series. Now, I know that you might be tired of me resting on that point, but I do feel it is important to acknowledge that series do have identities, and a lot of this series' identity is indelible as fuck. I feel like it's a little disingenuous to ignore that a lot of the changes made to the Metal Gear Solid game in the Twin Snakes were done specifically to make it and the Metal Gear Solid games that were blowing up at the time feel more like a cohesive family rather than two different families from the same town, if that makes any sense. Is the original OST iconic in a Halo kind of way? Yes. And to be fair, the original version of Metal Gear Solid is what we have in the Master Collection, with the soundtrack unchanged. So there really isn't much to argue about here anyway, with new players experiencing the original OST and not the new OST from the Twin Snakes. I just wanted to take this moment with that realization out of the way to say, hey, the Twin Snakes original soundtrack isn't that bad. It just isn't what people remember from a game that kind of defined the end of the PS1 era. Kind of like the Twin Snakes helped define the end of the GameCube era, but it definitely isn't bad. Some of those tracks are bangers, and the song during the credits is still great. Does the Twin Snakes feel different from the original Metal Gear Solid 1? Sure. But it does feel like a Metal Gear Solid game. It more than earns its spot in the series. It feels appropriately difficult for the mechanics introduced into this chapter of the story, a chapter that gave us new ways to traverse old maps and new spins on familiar experiences. The bosses all hold up, and in some cases have been improved by new gameplay tweaks, like Ocelot, the Tank, the Hind D, the Cyborg Ninja, even Liquid Snake, to an extent. Whether it was a tweak to the boss behavior or just a general uptick in difficulty, the fights that felt so comfortable before have a bit of a new edge in the Twin Snakes, and the cutscenes, in my honest opinion, add a certain style and flair that was absent from the first game and ever present in each subsequent game. You see it throughout Metal Gear Solid 2, 3, 4, Portable Ops, Peace Walker, Metal Gear Rising, and Metal Gear Solid 5. Why not have it in Metal Gear Solid 1? It gives the whole series that unique Metal Gear Solid feeling, and it shows something that Kojima had been trying to show the fans and Konami since finishing Metal Gear Solid 2. The series could continue without him, and I believe that. I mean, after all, this very Metal Gear Solid feeling game was made by a completely different team. I personally love games like the Twin Snakes, Portable Ops, Ghost Babel, Metal Gear Rising, All of those. Those are the strong indicators that there is talent out there worthy of continuing this series. Sure, there have been missteps. Survive was so bad that almost the whole fan base panned the crap out of it. But I think this series can be successful without Kojima. He left behind an awesome set of blueprints for these games, and there are plenty of talented people that could pick up the torch where he left. With him having his own studio and now apparently working on a new stealth game of his own, maybe it's time Konami tried to show us again that they can still do Metal Gear Solid. So, if I'm going to be real with you, I gotta say, I'm not super hopeful, and I'm not trusting them any further than I can throw them. But Metal Gear Solid 3 is one of my favorite video games of all time, right next to Final Fantasy VII and Bloodborne. So I do hope that Delta is ultimately a win for everyone. And the thing that keeps me optimistic about that is the Twin Snakes. So I guess I'm going to play that and Metal Gear Solid 3 a billion times between now and some unknown date in 2025, maybe, when Delta comes out. Because they're both pretty good. Well, this has been a lot of fun. I really enjoyed getting my thoughts out like this. Every step of this process has been something I looked forward to doing. I'm a little nervous about how this video is going to do because essays are not my normal content. So if you watch this all the way through, thank you so much. Please share if you thought it was good. Leave a comment, maybe even a thumbs up to let me know that you liked it. Hell, maybe I'll even do more of these. I could do a compare and contrast of Metal Gear Solid 3 and Delta. I could talk about Final Fantasy VII. I could do a lot. So who knows? Stay tuned. I do have more gameplay videos coming out all the time, so make sure to check those out. And fucking subscribe if you haven't, alright? Alright? Alright. I think that's about it. I'm gonna go take a piss. Bye!